Ilara had learned, over 3 long years, how to make herself small inside a palace built for someone else's comfort. She had learned which hallways to avoid, when the pack elders gathered to whisper, which servants would meet her eyes, and which would look through her like she was made of glass. She had learned, most of all, how to survive being married to a king who had never once chosen her. The night it began was the night of the blood moon, when the old laws of the Blackthorn pack demanded their alpha take a mate before the moon reached its highest point, or lose his claim to the throne to a cousin waiting eagerly in the wings. Ronin, young and proud and terrified of losing everything his father had built, had gone into the human town at the edge of his territory, searching for nothing in particular. He found Ilara instead, sitting alone on a bench outside a closed cafe, crying quietly over a life that had just fallen apart in ordinary human ways. A lost job, a broken lease, a mother 3 states away who couldn't help. The bond had snapped into place the moment their eyes met. Neither of them had asked for it. Neither of them had wanted it, not really, not in that first breathless moment of shock. But the old magic did not care about readiness. It simply happened, the way lightning happens, without permission from anyone standing beneath the sky. Ronin brought her home that same night, and from the very first morning, the palace made it clear she did not belong. She was human. She could not shift. She could not fight. She could not track a scent across a forest, or howl loud enough to be heard by the far borders. In a world built on strength and blood and old power, Ilara had none of the things that mattered, and everyone let her know it, every single day. What hurt most was not the pack's disdain. Wolves could be cruel, but Ilara had grown a thicker skin than anyone gave her credit for. What hurt was Ronin's silence. He never defended her in front of his council. He never sat beside her at dinner, unless tradition demanded it. He gave her a room in the East Wing, far from his own chambers, and visited so rarely that the staff began to whisper she was more prisoner than queen. She tried, in the beginning. She tried to learn the customs, to smile at gatherings where no one smiled back, to find small kindnesses in a life that offered her almost none. She tried to reach Ronin too, in quiet moments, asking about his day, offering to sit with him while he worked, leaving small gestures like a cup of tea by his study door. He accepted none of it. He was polite, in the cold way people are polite to strangers they intend to remain strangers with. He never explained why. He simply kept his distance, year after year, as if closeness itself were a danger he could not afford. Ilara did not know, because he never told her, that Ronin was afraid. He had watched his own father destroy himself loving a woman the pack disapproved of, watched the elders turn against them both until his father died defending a marriage no one else believed in. Ronin had promised himself, as a boy standing at his father's grave, that he would never let love make him that vulnerable. He would rule with his head, not his heart. And so when the mate bond gave him Ilara, he treated the gift like a burden, a complication he had to manage, rather than a person he might have loved. He told himself this was protecting her too. If he never grew close to her, the pack could never use her against him. If he kept her at a distance, she could never be a weapon in anyone's hands. He believed, in some twisted corner of his mind, that indifference was a kind of shelter. He never once considered that it was also a kind of wound, cutting a little deeper into Ilara with every year that passed. By the 3rd year, Ilara had stopped trying. She had built a small, quiet life within the palace's edges, reading in the library where no one bothered her, tending a garden behind the East Wing that had been forgotten by everyone but her. She no longer expected warmth. She had made peace, or something close to it, with a marriage that existed on paper and nowhere else. Then came the alliance talks with the Thornwood pack. She heard about it the way she heard about most things concerning her own life, second-hand, through a door left open a few inches too many. The council was discussing a marriage alliance, a joining of Blackthorn and Thornwood through a bond between Ronin and the Thornwood Alpha's daughter, a wolf named Sable, said to be strong and clever, and most importantly, exactly what a proper Alpha King's mate should be. The human was never meant to last, one advisor said, his voice carrying easily down the stone hallway. Once the alliance is secured, the king can set her aside. No one will question it. She has no pack, no standing, nothing to fight for herself with. Ilara stood frozen outside that door for a long moment, waiting to hear Ronin object, waiting for him to say that he would not simply discard the woman he had claimed under the blood moon, whatever their marriage had or had not become. The silence that followed was its own kind of answer. He said nothing, not one word in her defense. She walked back to her room that night with a strange, quiet calm settling over her, the kind of calm that comes after a person has finally stopped hoping for something that was never going to arrive. She did not cry. She had cried enough over Ronin in 3 years to last a lifetime, and she found, standing in the moonlight of her lonely chamber, that she simply had no tears left for this particular ending. She packed one bag before dawn. She took only what was hers before the marriage, a few clothes, an old photograph of her mother, a small amount of money she had saved from selling handmade jewelry to a shop in town, the only work the palace had allowed her to keep. She left behind every silk gown, every piece of jewelry Ronin had given her, out of obligation rather than affection. None of it had ever felt like it belonged to her anyway. Around her neck was a collar, thin and silver, enchanted by the pack's oldest magic, to bind mates together across any distance. It was meant to burn against the wearer's skin if they tried to leave the territory against the alpha's will, a cruel old law meant to prevent mates from fleeing unwanted bonds. But there was an older, gentler clause buried in the same magic, one most had forgotten existed. If a mate left freely, without force, and without the alpha's resistance, the collar would not burn. It would simply go cold, releasing its hold, becoming nothing more than ordinary silver. Ilara did not know this clause existed. She only knew that when she stepped past the final gate of Blackthorn territory as the sun rose, expecting pain, expecting the collar to punish her for leaving, she felt nothing but a small, cold click at her throat, and then silence. She did not stop to wonder what it meant. She simply kept walking, and did not look back. Ronin did not notice she was gone until mid-afternoon, when a servant mentioned, almost in passing, that the human queen had not come down for her morning tea. He barely reacted at first. It was not unusual for Ilara to keep to herself for days at a time. But something in his chest tightened anyway, an old instinct he had spent years ignoring. It was near evening when he finally understood. The collar, which he wore always beneath his armor on a long chain, a private habit he had never explained to anyone, and barely admitted to himself, had gone cold. Not broken, not destroyed, simply cold, the way metal goes cold when it no longer has a purpose to serve. He told himself it meant nothing. He told himself, standing alone in his empty study with the silver disc pressed between his fingers, that he did not care where she had gone or why. He told himself this for almost an entire night before the lie finally cracked apart, and he found himself standing outside her chamber door at 3 a.m, pushing it open to an empty room, a bare wardrobe, and a garden window left open to the cold. Something in him broke that night that he did not have words for. He stood in her empty room until sunrise, and when the light finally came through the window, he understood, all at once and far too late, exactly what he had thrown away. The weeks that followed were unlike anything the Blackthorn pack had ever seen from their king. Ronin called off the Thornwood alliance without explanation, leaving Sable's family furious, and the council scrambling to smooth over the insult. He sent scouts to every human town within 100 miles. When they returned with nothing, he sent warriors further still, calling in old favors from rival packs who owed him debts he had never once asked to be repaid, offering land, gold, anything, for a single word of where Ilara had gone. His advisors did not understand. The same king who had ignored her for 3 years was now tearing his own kingdom apart looking for her. They whispered that grief had made him unstable, that he was risking Blackthorn's stability and its alliances over a human woman who had never mattered to the pack's future. Ronin heard the whispers and did not care. For the first time in his life, he understood that some things mattered more than the throne, and he understood it only because he had lost the one thing that had quietly, invisibly mattered most. He searched for nearly 4 months before a trader mentioned a woman matching Ilara's description, working in a small bookshop in a coastal town 200 miles south, a place so far from wolf territory that no one had thought to look there. Ronin left that same hour, alone, without guards, without warning anyone where he was going. He found the shop on a quiet street, lined with salt-worn buildings, its windows warm with lamplight against the evening fog. Through the glass, he saw her before she saw him. She was laughing at something a customer had said, her hair loose around her shoulders, her whole posture different from anything he remembered. Looser, lighter, like a weight had been lifted off her that he had never even known she was carrying. When he stepped through the door, the small bell above it rang, and she looked up. Her laughter faded, but not into panic, not into fear. Something calmer and sadder crossed her face instead, the look of someone seeing a chapter of their life they had already closed. She did not run to him, she did not cry. She simply set down the book in her hands and asked, quietly, why he had come. Ronin had rehearsed 100 different speeches on the long drive south, careful arguments about duty and the throne, and the alliance he had called off in her name. Standing in front of her now, none of it felt true enough to say, so instead he told her the plain truth. He told her he had been a fool who mistook her patience for weakness and her silence for indifference. He told her he had spent 3 years protecting himself from a closeness he was too afraid to risk, and that in doing so, he had built a wall around his own heart that had cost him the only person who had ever truly stood beside him. He told her the palace had felt like a tomb without her in it, and that he had not understood what he had until it was gone. Ilara listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment, the shop humming softly around them with the ordinary sounds of a life she had built entirely on her own. She told him, gently but honestly, that love arriving 3 years too late was not truly love. It was guilt wearing love's face, showing up only once the cost of losing her had become unbearable. She told him she did not doubt his pain was real. But pain was not the same as the years of quiet devotion she had once offered him and received nothing in return for. She had rebuilt a life here where she was seen, where people chose her company, simply because they wanted to, not because an old magic had bound them together. She was not willing to trade that hard-won peace for a throne that had never once been offered to her with an open hand. Ronin did not argue. He had burned through alliances and reputation and pride to reach this single moment, and standing in front of her now, he understood that desperation could not undo 3 years of silence. He apologized once more, simply, without asking for anything in return, and then he left the shop the way he had entered it, alone. He did not go back to demand another chance. Instead, over the following months, he made quiet, steady changes that had nothing to do with winning her back, and everything to do with becoming someone worth knowing. He stepped down from the throne, passing leadership to his sister, who had always understood the pack's people better than he had. He spent his days working alongside ordinary members of Blackthorn instead of ruling from a distance, learning, slowly, what it meant to be present in someone's life, rather than simply responsible for it. He never pressured Ilara to notice any of it. He sent no letters demanding forgiveness, made no dramatic gestures meant to win her back. He simply lived differently, and let time carry the proof of it forward on its own. It took nearly 2 years before Ilara reached out to him first, a short message asking how he was, nothing more. They began writing to each other after that, slowly, carefully, like two people relearning a language they had once spoken badly. When she finally agreed to see him again, it was not a queen returning to a throne she had once fled. It was two people, finally standing as equals, choosing each other for the very first time, not because an old magic demanded it, but because they had both, at last, become people worth choosing.